battlefield to see where Lee's main attack on July the 2nd took place. We're going to be going through the area from which Pickett's charge started from on July the 3rd. Now, if you look hard to your left, in the distant treetops, you can see a light blue water tower. That water tower sits on Cemetery Hill, where the fish hook bends away from us to the southeast towards Culp's Hill. The cannons that we're driving by here, they represent General Lee's cannons for Day 2 and Day 3 of the battle. The part of the Confederate battle line that we're on now is going to run parallel to the shank of the Union fish hook, the straight part of the fish hook. We are going to be able to see some Confederate memorials as we drive down the Confederate battle line. Well, the South finally got around to putting up monuments here at Gettysburg. For the most part, they did not put up very many of these unit monuments the way the North did. For the most part, they're putting up state memorials to commemorate all of the soldiers that came from each state that made up the Confederacy. And the first of those Confederate state memorials that we're going to be driving by will be for the state of North Carolina. It'll be on our left in a little grove of trees. It's a statue of Confederate soldiers clustered around a flag in the act of charging towards the Union Center. The North Carolina State Memorial overlooks the fields of Pickett's charge on July the 3rd. And it was sculpted by the same man who sculpted Mount Rushmore, a guy named Gutzon Borglum. You can see it coming into view now here on our left.
Oh, wow. Can I ask about Pickett's charge? I mean, from what we saw, from some of what I've seen in Gettysburg, like they talk about how long was the charge, and we kind of know like when the artillery started firing, because you said they're after for a mile. So were they running for like a full mile towards the Union lines, or?
So don't worry, I'll get to all of that.
Got it.
It's okay. It's okay. Here on the left, Tennessee State Memorial. But Pickett's charge is not a very good name for Lee's final attack because it wasn't really a charge, it was more of a march. They didn't start to charge until they got nice and close to the Union Center. But in total there was about 14,000 soldiers in that attack. Only about half of them made it back to this tree line here in one piece. By the time it was over, General Lee had lost about a third of his army in these attacks. He won't have the men or the ammunition he needs to continue on the offensive. This is when he's going to have to head back home to Virginia. Speaking of Virginia, here it is, the Virginia State Memorial. Now that's General Lee on the very top. General Lee is a Virginian. He is portrayed mounted on his famous horse, Traveler. But today, General Lee and Traveler, their statue looks out across the fields of Pickett's charge. On the front of the monument are statues of Confederate soldiers, and each one of them represents a different walk of life that the citizen soldiers of Virginia would have come from. So from left to right, we have a professional man, a mechanic, an artist, on horseback as a boy. Then comes a businessman, a farmer, and blowing the bugle as a youth. Not sure what the difference between a boy and a youth is, but they have them both up there. Now, the other reason why Pickett's charge is not a very good name for Lee's final attack is because General George Pickett, the Confederate general for whom the attack ended up being named, he actually commanded less than half the soldiers that were in that attack. He commanded a division of about 5,000 Virginians, and his wing of the attack formed for the attack in front of these woods here on our left. They did not form in the woods the way they did in the movie Gettysburg. That's a historical inaccuracy of that movie. Yes, I You know, it's shocking Hollywood would get history wrong. Sorry to disappoint you. The other wing of the attack, another 7,000 soldiers, started for the area of the North Carolina State Memorial. Those guys went straight across the fields. Pickett's men went across the fields diagonally to close a quarter-mile gap between the two wings. Coming up on our right, you'll see the Florida State Memorial. There was to have been a second wave to Lee's final attack, perhaps as many as 12,000 additional soldiers. But of the second wave, only 2,000 Florida and Alabama soldiers actually advanced, and they went the wrong way. Nobody told them that they'd have to cross the fields diagonally to catch up to Pickett's guys. They were just told to advance, so they blundered straight on ahead, hit the Union battle line far to the south of where Pickett's men did, where they were of no use to anybody. But talking about Pickett's charge, it did jump ahead to the third day of the battle. We're going to bring it back now to the second day of the battle.
Street statue is available for you. Pause it from there.
So at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon of July the 2nd, we'd have thousands of Confederate soldiers start to form their battle line along the tree line here on our right. They're commanded by the fellow whose statue you see here on our right. His name is James Longstreet, played in the movie Gettysburg by actor Tom Berenger. And so he's Lee's right-hand man here at Gettysburg. Lee refers to him as my old war horse, even though he's younger than Lee. And with Stonewall Jackson dead, Longstreet was Lee's only experienced corps commander coming into the invasion of Pennsylvania. So as Longstreet's soldiers, as they are forming their battle line along the tree line here on our right, they're going to look across the open fields on our left. They're going to see Northern soldiers lined up along the road. You can see marked by the white fences on either side of the red barn. They're not supposed to be there. They're supposed to be where you see the tree line in the distance. Some Northern general has moved over 10,000 soldiers out in front of where they're supposed to be. I'm going to say more about him in a little bit, but first, coming up on our left, we're going to be passing by the Louisiana State Memorial, which portrays a very muscular woman floating above the body of a dead Confederate soldier. She holds a cannonball with a lit fuse in her right hand. We had Louisiana artillery on this part of the Confederate battle line. That's why the monument's here. Coming up on the left now, you'll see the Mississippi State Memorial, portraying a soldier using his musket like a club to defend his fallen flag bearer. We also had Mississippi infantry on this part of the line. And coming up on the left, we're going to be passing by our 75-foot observation tower. It had to be closed on occasion by the park during the 1950s on orders of the United States Secret Service. The reason why is because a general from a different war, from World War II, when he retired from the Army, he purchased a farm adjacent to the battlefield and was then elected President of the United States. Call out his name if you know it.
Eisenhower.
That's right, General and President Dwight D. Eisenhower. As we pass by the tower on our left, you'll catch a glimpse of his barn on the right. It's the big light-colored barn about half a mile away from us, with the line of evergreen trees extending to the right of the barn. Those evergreen trees line President Eisenhower's driveway. Coming up on the right now is the Georgia State Memorial. General Longstreet and nearly half the soldiers with him making the main attack for Lee on July the 2nd were Georgians. Coming up on the right now is the South Carolina State Memorial. The war began in South Carolina in April of 1861 at a place called Fort Sumter. When President and Mrs. Eisenhower wanted to get away from Washington, they'd come to their farm here in Gettysburg. And when they did, the tower made the Secret Service very, very nervous. Can't close it, which seems reasonable enough, except What that meant was that every time somebody drove by the tower and saw that it was closed, they immediately knew the president was home. But the Eisenhowers did will that form to the park upon their deaths. So it is part of the park today. If you want to drive down there and walk around the grounds, you can. Coming up on the right now, you're going to see the Arkansas State Memorial. Just one regiment in Lee's Army from the state of Arkansas. On the left, you have a really nice view of the Round Tops. Big Round Top's the big one. Little Round Top's the left of it. You'll notice how the western slope of Little Round Top is bare. That makes it the more important of the two hills because you can use cannons up there. Big Round Top is too steep and has too many trees on it. It's worthless for cannons. The top of the northern fishhook was actually supposed to have been on top of Little Round Top, not on top of Big Round Top. I say supposed to have been because the northern general who commands this end of the fishhook was not a professional soldier. He was a New York politician by the name of Dan Sickles. He's in the high command of the Northern Army in part because he has friends in high places. And General Sickles decided he didn't like the ground he was assigned to on the fishhook. He decided that a ridge line out in front of him was better ground. So between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the afternoon of the battle's second day, without even telling his commanding general, George Meade, what he was doing, he will move the 3rd Corps of the Northern Army, over 10,000 soldiers, out in front of where they're supposed to be. And by the end of the battle's second day, that forward line that he occupied will have been crushed by the Confederate attack. But the Union fishhook was still intact. I'll tell you all about it, but first I want to offer you everyone a restroom break. We have 49 minutes left on the tour. If you don't think you can make it another 49 minutes without a restroom, I suggest you speak now or forever hold your pee.
I can wait.
Men's room to the left of the building, ladies' room to the right of the building.
I can wait. Yeah, I'm just fine. Some people are gonna let me get away, yeah. Yeah, I can wait, but if you're stopping anyway.
As well.
Okay.
You'd be good to be here, high 61. But, yeah. Taking a bathroom break. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Buggy
I
room.
double checked with the guy. The Wisconsin 22nd was the 26th was the 1st, 5th, 7th, 10th, 6th. Well, I just figured I'd ask if they had a mountain man.
Interesting. Interesting.
Well, we know where Federal meeting was at one time. Running around some poor guy.
Alright, so if you didn't get a good look at the Eisenhower farm before, you got a better one now on the left. There's that big light colored barn. Farmhouse is just to the left of it. Then you have a second farmhouse a little further to the left where his herdsmen lived. Eisenhower raised black Angus cattle here at his farm in Gettysburg. So if you want to drive down there, you take the left coming up here, just ahead of us. Alright, so getting back to our New York Congressman, Dan Sickles. To be fair to him, he did not have a problem with where the end of his line up on Little Round Top with his soldiers for the Confederate cannons. In Lee's original plan, Longstreet was to attack up the road that we're on right now with his left flank on the road and his right flank pointing toward Big Round Top. Remember when Lee made that plan, he did not think that there were any Northern soldiers in those two hills. Sickles, by moving out in front of where he was supposed to have been, is actually going to move into the way of this Confederate attack. Had them back then. And half of General Sickles' battle line is going to run from this peach orchard that you see now here on our right along this road that we're on right now in front of us, past the first red barn that you see up that road here in front of us, and then it's going to go past the second red barn that's up this road here in front of us. The ridge line General Sickles is following runs parallel to the road that we're on. However, here at the peach orchard on our right, on the other side of that peach orchard from where we are, the ridge line Sickles was following disappeared on him. So here at the peach orchard, the other half of his line is going to bend back in the direction of Big Round Top, but he does not have enough soldiers to extend the line all the way to the top of Big Round Top. That's a problem. Normally, you want to anchor your flank on top of high ground so it's easier to defend your flank. Well, Sickles' flank instead will end at the bottom of Big Round Top at a big rock formation called the Devil's Den. At about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the Confederates will attack Sickles' forward line after they've bombarded it with their cannons for about an hour first. Now, coming into view on our left, coming out from behind a witness tree, you're going to see a brick barn to his right leg to this day, and the national field here on our right was planted in wheat at the time of the battle. It became known as the wheat field, or the bloody wheat field. When the Confederates attacked Sickles, they were coming through the woods at the far end of that field, coming towards us. Northern reinforcements being shifted from the center of the Union fishhook will arrive coming in from our left. They include the famous Irish Brigade. The battle lines went back and forth across this area for 2.5 hours. Now, if we were to turn right at this road that we're passing on our right, we'd be heading to where the end of Sickles' line had been at the Devil's Den. Currently, that road is closed the buses, but not the cars. So if you want to check out that rock formation, you can come back here after the tour. This little valley that you see here in front of Little Round Top was not flooded at the time of the battle. We've had a beaver family move into this valley. Sickles, their battle line was a little bit longer than Sickles' battle line, and what that meant was that Texas and Alabama soldiers at the end of their battle line were able to wrap on the end of Sickles' line at the Devil's Den. They went right up and over Big Round Top. They nearly captured Little Round Top. Had they captured Little Round Top, they would have been in behind the end of Sickles' line at the Devil's Den. If they could have gotten cannons up there, those cannons would have been able to fire right down the length of the Union Center as well. That's the hill that they really want. But General Meade is also sending Sickles reinforcements from the Union Reserve in the rear of the fishhawk. Some of those reinforcements would arrive on Little Round Top 5 minutes before the Confederate soldiers got there. They'll take position at the south end of the hill facing Big Round Top, and at the left end of that line is the famous 20th Maine Regiment.
Look at that.
Okay, if you ever see the movie Gettysburg, the fight for the 20th Maine holding the end of the line on Little Round Top was about a half an hour of that movie. They started Terry Hill. At the time, New York has more soldiers killed here at Gettysburg to be buried in that cemetery than any other state. And at the time their monument went up in the National Cemetery, it was the largest monument on the battlefield. That's when the state of Pennsylvania said, wait a minute, this is Pennsylvania soil. We can't allow New York to have the biggest monument. So directly in front of us is what they did about it.
Oh.
Pennsylvania Memorial weighs in at over 3,500 tons. On top of it is a statue of an angel. She represents Nike, the Greek goddess of peace and victory, and athletic shoes. As we approach the Pennsylvania State Memorial, we'll be passing on our left the Minnesota State Memorial with a statue of a charging soldier on top of it. The state of Minnesota had just one regiment here at Gettysburg, but they did more than their share. They lost about 3/4 of their soldiers during the battle, and during Pickett's charge, they captured a Virginia battle flag. To this day, the state of Minnesota will not give that flag back to the state of Virginia. As we go by the Pennsylvania State Memorial, notice the metal tablets that go around the bottom of the monument. They have inscribed on them the names of over 34,000 Pennsylvania soldiers that were on the rosters of Pennsylvania units that took part in the Gettysburg campaign. Each tablet is for a different regiment, so if you knew which unit your ancestor was surgeon for, that could help find his name. Coming up on the right now, you'll see a tall, skinny monument with the statue of a general on top of it. That is the Vermont State Memorial. And after we pass by it on our right, we'll pass on our left another tall, skinny monument that looks like a miniature of the Washington Monument. That obelisk commemorates all the soldiers in the Northern Army who were United States regulars. That means they served in units that were part of the United States Army before and after the war. And that most of the units that were created by the various states just for the war itself, and then they get disbanded when the war is over, although some of them still exist today as National Guard units. The clump of trees coming up on our left traditionally became known as the high water mark of Pickett's charge. As we go by them, you'll notice at the base of the trees is a monument shaped like an open book. It's called the High Water Mark Memorial. If you think of Pickett's charge as being like a sea of men, the farthest point that they get to is like high tide or the high water mark. And we're going to be making a stop here at the high water mark of Pickett's charge. I want to show you a real cannon barrel close up. And I'll tell you more about the cannons that are being used here and more about the third day of the battle.
Yeah, this spot here.
Just want you to be careful. We're going to be crossing the road. Watch for cars coming up from behind us, alongside our left. We don't need any more casualties here at Gettysburg.
We got
You think we have plenty?
You're in Gettysburg. Gettysburg.
Okay, so you tell the real ones from the fake ones. First trick, on top and the back of the cannon barrel. There should be a little hole there called a vent. Without that hole, the cannon's worthless because that's where the cannon's fired from. Fakes don't have that hole. Second trick, look for markings on the cannon barrel. For example, this one is stamped US for United States. On the muzzle face, you have the year the barrel was forged, the weight of the barrel, the serial number, and the foundry mark. Sometimes you have markings on the sides, either here or here. Sometimes at the back, the breech. Fakes don't have the markings. You remember how the U.S. Treasury did quarters for all the different states? The states and territories the quarters for, they're spread on national parks. Each state was allowed to choose a national park within their boundaries for their quarters. Whereas Pennsylvania's turn in 2011, they chose Gettysburg. And the monument you see over here, the soldier using his musket like a club, they put that on the Gettysburg quarter. The view on the quarter is looking over the top of this cannon, with the red horn in the middle distance also on the quarter. I just happen to have one of those quarters with me, so I'll pass that around to you. Cannons fire 4 different types of ammunition. First type is just a solid hunk of iron. It's called shot. Second type is an explosive shell. It's hollow on the inside, filled with gunpowder, and has a fuse on it. When the cannon's fired, the shell's engulfed for a split second by a sheet of flame. That lights the fuse. The fuse will burn while the shell's in the air, and the trick was to set the fuse to get the shell to explode in the air or over top or right in front of your enemy battle line, at which point the outer casing of the shell will fragment into jagged hunks of iron like this. That will kill and wound your enemy soldiers if you time it right. This is a shell fragment from a rifled cannon. I'll pass this around to you so you can feel the weight of it. The third type of ammunition these cannons use at long range is called case, which is similar to a shell, but instead of just having gunpowder on the inside of it, you also have lead musket balls on the inside that would spray out when it exploded. And that type of ammunition was invented by a British officer whose name was Henry Shrapnel.
Oh.
I wonder where that word comes from. I don't know.
Want to feel it?
Finally, at short range, when I say short range, I'm talking to the Emmitsburg Road here in front of us. Short range, these cannons fire something called canister, which is a tin can full of these iron balls. Cannons fire, the tin can tears open, the cannon becomes a shotgun on steroids. So I'm going to pass this around real quick.
How much gunpowder do you need to fire off a cannon?
So for a rifle for one of these cannons, it'd be a 1 pound charge. The smoothbore cannons, even though they don't shoot as far as the rifles do, they have a wider diameter to the bore. So you actually need a 2 pound charge for those.
Can't imagine the supply chain.
At Yorktown, they put together a little cannon crew amongst the people. So
Oh,
they called out, they had a script to call out the command.
yes.
So everybody got excited, they got a shot off, and they said, now if you were a really good cannon crew, you could do 3 of those in a minute.
And we have enough for a cannon crew here because we got 9 people. Cannon crew is 8 people. 6 more guys take care of the 12 horses for each cannon. 15th guy's in charge of the ammunition. 16th person commands the entire operation. So we got a gun crew and a cannon commander here.
How many horses?
Oh, it's so short. A couple horses.
12 horses for each cannon. You may notice the 2-wheeled vehicles parked behind the cannons here. Well, those are called limbers. And on the axle of the limber is an ammunition chest. Sticking out in front of the limber towards the cannon is a pole, and hitched to that pole would have been a team of 6 horses. So when it comes time to move the cannon, the horses would move the limber up close to the cannon. They'd swing the limber around, and the back of the cannon, the trail of the cannon, would be lifted up and hitched to the back of the limber. The limber and the cannon together now form a 4-wheeled carriage. The horses can move around. But each cannon had a second limber assigned to it, and a second team of 6 horses. But hitched to the back of the second limber is a 2-wheeled part called a caisson. The caisson carries 2 more ammunition chests and a spare wheel for each cannon. So on the other side of the road, we have replicas of the caissons hitched behind these. And the caissons before. Have you ever heard that song before? Now you know what a caisson is.
Yeah.
Don't worry, I won't do any more singing. You can gallop the cannon into position. Now on the march, of course, you're not galloping horses, but they'll, you know, go at the same speed. You have guys marching. But yeah, when you need to get them into position or out of position in a hurry, you can gallop the cannon into position or out of position. One time I was at Petersburg, Virginia, and actually saw a demonstration where they actually did that.
Oh, wow.
Which is pretty cool. Guys riding on the ammunition chest, holding on to dear life.
Kind of man.
Okay. On July the 2nd, the fighting at Sickles ended. The battlefield fizzled out around sunset. No daylight savings time back then. Sunset was 7:30. At this point in time, the fighting is only just beginning over the other end of the field. So, the fighting would go on into the night. Both became too dark to fight anymore. And resumed the next morning. Go on all day, all morning. We'll be going to Combs Hill, but it's just more time at this By the afternoon of July the 3rd, he only has enough men and ammunition left for one more big attack. He still has soldiers over at Combs Hill, even though they failed to capture that hill. They'll be the anvil for his final attack. Pickett's charge coming across the open fields behind you will be the hammer. He wants to try to crush the hook part of the Union fishhook. If he does this, he wins the battle. Now, before he sends his men across these open fields, he's going to try to break up the northern center first with his cannons. And at 1:07 in the afternoon of July the 3rd, over 150 of these cannons opened fire. Over 100 northern cannons returned fire or blaze away at each other for the better part of 2 hours. For all the noise the Confederate cannons made, they failed to break up the northern center like Lee hoped they would. Most of his gunners were overshooting by just a little bit. There's too much smoke on the Union battle line for them to see that they needed to adjust their aim and adjust the fuses on their shells. Also, the northern center is being protected by a farmer's stone fence. It's not very high, but it's better than nothing. You can see it behind you. The Union battle line ran along the stone fence to where you see the angle of the stone fence, where the big tree is all by itself. The Union battle line stopped there and started up again over here. The stone fence runs closer to the crest of the ridge. The angle of the stone wall would become known simply as the angle. It ends up being the dividing point between where Pickett's wing of the attack hits on our side of the angle, the other wing of the attack hits the Union center on the other side of the angle. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the cannons have gone silent. The Confederates will start across the open fields. By the time they get to the center of the open fields, enough of the gunpowder smoke has dissipated that Union soldiers behind the stone wall can see them. And those who survived the war would later say that it was the most magnificent spectacle they saw in the entire war. The masses of men marching in formation with scarlet battle flags overhead. Pickett's Virginians, the two wings of the attack converge on one another as they reach the Emmitsburg Road. Pickett's Virginians will cross the road, straighten their battle line in full view of the Union battle line, scream the rebel yell, and charge. That's when the Northern soldiers rise up from behind the stone fence, start to fire thousands of bullets into the Confederate lines. Northern regiments on either side of the Confederates came out from their own lines and turned to hit the Confederates on their flanks. The Confederates kept coming, and here in front of us, Pickett's Virginians will drive Northern soldiers back from the stone wall, only to find a second Union battle line waiting for them about where the road is today. One of Pickett's officers, a guy named Armistead, is going to lead some of the men over the wall to try to break this second Union battle line. We have a small marker right here with a skull top on it that marks about where he was shot down. When he went down, that second Union battle line is going to charge and collide with the Confederates in the front. That's where they're using their bayonets, they're using the muskets like clubs, they're using their fists. Hand-to-hand fighting is very common in movies. Much more rare in actual Civil War combat. So it's hand-to-hand, you know, it's a desperate situation. But by 4 in the afternoon, the stone fence had been recaptured. The survivors of the attack had made their way back to the distant tree line. It's time for Lee to head back home to Virginia. He's going to escape to fight again another day, and the war is going to drag on for nearly 2 more years. But traditionally, the high watermark of Pickett's charge would become known as the high watermark of the Confederacy, because ever after Pickett's charge, the tide of the South is receding. It's mostly downhill to the south of Pickett's charge. So, did I adequately answer your questions that you had earlier on the bus?
Yes. Okay, yeah, now I can kind of visualize it. Thanks.
Okay. You're welcome. But any questions?
Pickett's charge as stupid or like that. It seems like maybe it's truly the army.
Had the artillery done its job, broke up the Union center ahead of time, and had the entire second wave move forward in the proper direction, it might have worked.
Yeah.
We'll never know that.
If the South had won the Civil War.
Hard to say what would have happened. But you know, if those things happen, you know, then it doesn't look like such a bad move. Most of those things cannot happen. That's why I think it's kind of jumping over But we're gonna head back on the bus, and on our way back to where we started, we're gonna be going through Fulton's Hill back. We're back at Cemetery Hill where we started.
Those John and Kate songs, are they running back and forth to supply? Shoot a lot of ammunition.
So to our right front, you see a statue of our victorious Northern commander, George Meade, on his horse, which was named Baldy. And today, General Meade and Baldy are having a steering contest with General Lee and Traveler on top of the Virginia Memorial.
That feels about right.
Neither one of those generals has blinked in over 100 years. And here where the stone wall runs closer to the crest of the ridge, none of the Confederate soldiers made it over the wall here except as prisoners. This wing of the Confederate attack came under fire as they reached the Emmitsburg Road. They had to climb those post and rail fences that line the road under fire. And one of the Confederate survivors said that so many Yankee bullets were hitting the fence rails that it sounded like rain on the roof. Now, the very day after Pickett's charge is the 4th of July. 1,000 miles away from us in the city of Vicksburg, Mississippi, another Southern Army of 30,000 soldiers will surrender to another Union Army commanded by General U.S. Grant. Gettysburg and Vicksburg together is going to be a 1-2 punch the South never recovers from. 7,000 soldiers were killed outright. 34,000 more were wounded. Of that number, 3,000 of them are mortally wounded. They're so badly hurt, the surgeons can't do anything for them. The dead of both sides would be buried on the battlefield where they fell by the soldiers in shallow graves, usually marked by a fence post stuck in the ground. The fall of 1863, the Union dead will be recovered from the battlefield and reinterred into the National Cemetery, which you can see over top the stone wall here on our left. On our right is the Maryland State Memorial, with a statue of 2 soldiers on it. Both of them are from the state of Maryland, but one's a Confederate soldier, one's a Union soldier. They're both wounded, so they support one another as they look for a field hospital. Also on the right is the Delaware State Memorial. Maryland and Delaware were both southern states that stayed in the Union. The state of Maryland actually had units fighting in both armies here at Gettysburg. Little white farmhouse here on our right is George Meade's headquarters. A lot of people think that Meade did not chase after Lee after the battle. He did. Chased after Lee consciously, and he'll be badly criticized for letting Lee get away after the battle. So General Grant will be the big hero of the hour for the North, Eventually, he'll be made General-in-Chief of all the Northern armies. Now, the following year, 1864, this rebuilt Northern Army will move against Lee down in Virginia to fight Lee battle after battle. And George Meade technically does command this Northern Army until the end of the war. However, his new boss, General Grant, will be traveling with this army. So it's really Grant calling the shots. And that's why when Lee finally surrenders in April of 1865, he's surrendering to General Grant and not to George Meade. This will catapult General Grant to the presidency, and that's why he's on the $50 bill today, and poor George Meade has largely been forgotten by the public. What we're doing now is we're cutting across the rear of the Union fish hook line to head over to Culp's Hill. A lot of the Union field hospitals would have been back here. So your ancestor might have been back here, although he might have been at one of the field hospitals in town for the first day of the battle. I want you to keep in mind that there was no antiseptic surgery back then. The surgeons were not sterilizing the instruments. When the wounds become infected, there are no antibiotics to fight those infections with. It may have been as many as 5,000 more soldiers who died later on from infections or other complications. We had 10,000 more that were taken prisoner. Many of them will die in the prison camps from disease, malnutrition, abuse, and exposure. Part of Lee's plan for his final attack involved his cavalry. Lee's cavalry was not here on the first 2 days of the battle. 6 days before the battle, they had tried to raid behind the Northern Army, and they ended up getting cut off from Lee. That's why Lee stumbled into a battle here at Gettysburg before he was ready for it. Remember, cavalry is the eyes and ears of your army. Now, they did rejoin Lee's army on the evening of the battle's second day. On the battle's third day, Lee wanted to send them back to the rear of the Northern Army so that when Pickett's charge crushes the hook part of the Union fish hook, all those Northern soldiers would then retreat right down the road that we're about to turn onto here at the stop sign. As the Union soldiers retreat down this road to our right, they would find Lee's cavalry waiting for them to help finish them off. This road was General Meade's supply line. Well, the Confederate cavalry started north of town. They got 2.5 miles east of town, and there they were intercepted by the Northern cavalry. They fought a little battle out there east of town, and in that fighting, the Confederate cavalry would be turned back. So that part of Lee's plan also failed. Now, there was a young man fighting out there east of town for the North who was the youngest general in either army. He was just 23 years old, and he was known as the Boy General. 3 days before the battle, they promoted him to the rank of general from the rank of captain. They skipped him over 3 ranks to make him a general. Now, he was still a low-ranking general, so he didn't command all of the Northern cavalry, but he did steal the spotlight out there east of town, and he likes the spotlight. He led 2 very dramatic mounted charges that stopped a couple of Confederate attacks. And here at Gettysburg, he became famous for the first time. 13 years later, he'll become infamous fighting Native Americans in Montana at the Battle of Little Bighorn, where he and his detachment of the 7th United States Cavalry Regiment will be wiped out by the Sioux Cheyenne Indians. You know who I'm talking about? I'll call out his name.
Custer.
You got it. George Armstrong Custer. Of course, the Battle of Little Bighorn is also known as Custer's Last Stand. I'd like you to think of Gettysburg as being his first stand. Went a lot better than his last stand did. But I want to back up to the evening of the battle's second day. When Sickles' forward line started collapsing, General Meade started to panic a little bit, and he started to move most of the soldiers that were on Culp's Hill over to the other end of the battlefield to help out. That turned out to be a huge mistake. He had already sent enough soldiers over there to help out. And the Confederates at this end of the battlefield will see the Union soldiers leaving Culp's Hill. They'll report that back to General Ewell, who will now decide the time is right to attack at this end of the battlefield. And that attack began around sunset, about 7:30. It'll go on into the night. Today at the base of Culp's Hill, we have the Indiana State Memorial coming up on our right with 2 shafts on the monument. Those shafts represent liberty and equality. Here it is here on the right. Also at the base of Culp's Hill was a spring called Spengler's Spring. You can see a stone structure dug into the ground here on our left with a railing partway around it. That marks where Spengler's Spring flowed from at the time of the battle. When you have 168,000 soldiers in one area, and it's the first week in July, and everybody's wearing wool uniforms, freshwater sources are important. Spengler's Spring would have the distinction of being used by both sides, although not at the same time, despite what the legends say. All day of July the 2nd, Northern soldiers had access to the spring, but on the night of July the 2nd, Confederate soldiers will have access to the spring. You see, Culp's Hill is really 2 hills. We're going up and over the lower of the 2 knobs that make up the hill, and on the evening of July the 2nd, Confederate soldiers attacking through the woods from our right, they will capture this lower knob of Culp's Hill, and now they can use the spring. We're going to move on now to the main knob of Culp's Hill, which never did get captured by the Confederates, which is a good thing for the North, because if they had captured it, they would have collapsed the hook part of the Union fish hook. They would have won the battle. Fortunately for the Northern Army, the Union soldiers that were left behind here on the evening of July the 2nd, even though they were stretched out very thin, they'd had all day to build the barricades in front of their lines. They piled up logs and rocks and dirt to protect themselves. At the edge of the woods on our right is a low berm covered with weeds that marks the original barricades once stood. And as we climb up the main knob of Culp's Hill, we'll be passing on our right, a little further up the road, a monument that has on top of it a statue of a Union soldier firing over the top of the barricade into the woods. You may notice that a lot of the monuments here on Culp's Hill have stars on them. Some of them have crosses on them. The reason for that is because every infantry corps in the Northern Army, and there were 7 of them, had their own special corps badge the men would wear on their uniforms to show what corps they belonged to. The men were very proud of their corps badges, so when they put up their monuments here at Gettysburg, they liked to put their corps badges on the monuments. The 1st Corps had a circle. The 2nd Corps had a clover leaf. The 3rd Corps had a diamond. Then it skipped to the 5th Corps that had a Maltese cross. The 6th Corps had a Greek cross. Then it skipped again to the 11th Corps that had a crescent moon. And finally, the 12th Corps has the star. Looking at the monuments here at Gettysburg today is a little bit like looking into a bowl of Lucky Charms cereal, although they are not magically delicious. So here's the summit of Culp's Hill. Here's the last of our observation towers. Union soldiers were able to clear enough trees from the summit here that they were able to get 5 cannons up here. By 10 o'clock, 10:30 on the night of July the 2nd, it was so dark here on Culp's Hill, the 2 sides were firing at one another's muzzle flashes. The fighting will fizzle out then for the day. Lee will reinforce his soldiers over here during the night, and on the morning of July the 3rd, at first light, at about 4 o'clock in the morning, the fighting will resume and go on for 7 more hours. However, what had been a thin line here the evening before for the Northern Army is going to be the next morning a very solid line, because all the Northern soldiers who left this hill the day before came back during the night. During those 7 hours of fighting, the Confederates won't make a dent against the Union barricades, and by 11 o'clock in the morning, the woods in front of these barricades will be carpeted with the Confederate dead and wounded. On the evening of July the 2nd, Cemetery Hill was also attacked, just like Culp's Hill had been. Confederates attacking from the direction of the town will wheel from right to left across the open fields here on our right. They'll strike a northern battle line that was at the base of Cemetery Hill. They'll drive it from the bottom of the hill to the top of the hill, or they'll fight hand-to-hand with Union gunners on top of Cemetery Hill. The Northern Army had over 60 cannons on Cemetery Hill, and you can see that some of those cannon positions coming into view here on our right between us and the water tower. Directly in front of us is the cemetery for which Cemetery Hill gets its name from. That's the private cemetery. At the time of the battle, it had only been around for 9 years, so 99% of the gravestones you see in that cemetery today would not have been here in 1863. We might scrape bottom here, so I just want to warn you ahead of time. Eli's pretty good at avoiding that, though. Now, the entranceway to the private cemetery at the time of the battle was through a brick gatehouse that still stands today at the very top of the hill. Because this was a bare hill at the time of the battle, the gatehouse stuck out like a sore thumb and became an iconic landmark of the Battle of Gettysburg. It has been added onto over the years, so it looks a little different today, but you'll still see the distinctive archway right in the middle of this red brick building here on our left as we drive by. So here's the gatehouse. So we come over the top of the hill, now on the left behind the iron fence, there's the National Cemetery again. Back over on the right, I want you to try to imagine the Confederates coming over the brow of the hill. They almost reached the gatehouse. For the nick of time, again, Northern reinforcements being shifted from the Union center, arrive on the scene and launch a counterattack past the gatehouse that drove those Confederate soldiers right back down Cemetery Hill where they had started from. And we're back where we started from. Today, 3,500 of the Union dead now sleep on Cemetery Hill, as well as thousands of other veterans from all of the wars of the United States. From the Civil War III of Vietnam, you'll be able to catch a glimpse of the main monument for the state of New York. When we get by this red building coming up on our left, you'll look into the cemetery, you'll see a tall, skinny monument with a statue of a woman on top of it. And that is the main monument for the state of New York. The woman on top overlooks the New York section of the National Cemetery. You can catch a glimpse of her right about now.
Yes. Yep.
Now, the day President Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address on Cemetery Hill, he was not the keynote speaker. Another man spoke before Lincoln. That guy spoke for 2 hours.
Oh.
Nobody today remembers what that guy said. He sat down, Lincoln stood up, spoke for 2 minutes, and made history. I think there's a lesson to be learned in there somewhere. This has been a 2-hour tour. So it's my hope that you'll remember this tour a little bit better than we remember that other guy's speech. I want to thank you for taking our tour. Thank you for your business, and thank you for your interest in what happened here. Before you disembark, can we have a big round of applause for our driver, Eli?
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for visiting us. Enjoy the rest of your day, and have safe travels back home.
Okay, Elizabeth. Yep.
You got that?
Yeah, that's what you say.
Well, actually, big decision.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Anytime, you have the one.
Okay, thanks.
Take them a tour.
Thank you. Thanks. Oh, okay.
All right, downtown?
That last step.
What? Yeah. I just want to tell them something. Okay, so that was the what? I suppose it's burning something. I don't know. That was the tour. Thank you to Snow Remover. Thank you, little lady, for the super chats. Appreciate that.
Definitely, it's a lot different from what I remember when
So
we
that's
were
the
little.
National Cemetery over there.
A lot different
That's-
when we were little.
I know. Very different. Well, we went on the double-decker
I
bus
don't
then.
remember the monuments.
I remember going by the cannons a long time ago. But this is downtown Gettysburg. And isn't that's where the National Cemetery is in there?
And then there's the New York Monument.
Oh yeah, there's the New York Monument over here. Let's see if I can get a better picture of this. Let's see. Hi, Video Reel. How are you? So, this is downtown Gettysburg. There's a lot of, we haven't been here in a long time, since the late 1990s. So, when did we stay in the 1863? Was it?
1863.
Yeah, it's rated one of the, it is the top at, I think, #1 hotel there. I thought we did go to the souvenir shops and stuff. I remember the boys got muskets. Ray and Michael got muskets and those Union hats.
Yeah, they got the muskets and stuff, but I don't ever remember.
And they got the Union hats, you don't remember? And we got the t-shirts.
But I don't remember, like, town being that nice.
Well, it's changed. I mean, there's a lot of shops and things. We went in there. Okay, let me just tell you that. I just want to tell them one thing. That's the, why do I call her Sarah? Jenny Wade house. We went in there. Let me zoom in on it. We took a tour in there. Right there is the Jenny Wade house. Jenny Wade was the only civilian killed in the battle. And there was the bullet holes. I have some pictures of them that went through the door. She was making biscuits at the time. Jenny Wade, yeah, the only civilian, right? I-61. That's the Jenny Wade house. We went into there and yeah, the bullet holes and stuff like that. And then that down there is like downtown Gettysburg. Up down there is,
Really crazy. She was the only civilian killed.
and then we went into, that's Jenny Wade. So thank you guys. I'll let you know if there's anything else interesting, but we're gonna hit a couple of places. But you can't believe I'm at Gettysburg. I know High 61 that I have here. He is a Civil War lunatic guy. He cannot believe I'm here. This is like he said. This is the Holy Grail.
Really?
Yeah. He loves it. He's the one I told you about. We went to a miniature soldier shop. High 61. And I told you, right?
Yeah,
I said I have a guy that would go crazy in here. Some of the soldiers how much were they? Like an individual soldier.
It was like definitely $100.
Like $100. They had miniature soldiers. It's crazy. Kevin's on an airplane video reel. But yeah, you would love it. They had all kinds of models, wrist games. Yeah. So many crazy things. I do want to go to this Polish pottery shop and the Vera Bradley outlet. I know that's not what you care about, but I did get a Gettysburg hoodie because I always have to get a hoodie, and I got a mug because I got to get a mug, a really nice one. But Yeah, I told my daughter, I'm like, I have a guy that watches me and he would be flipping his head off in this place. There's some of the old buildings there. But anyway, I'll let you know if I see anything. Let me see, how do I get over this? Oh, over here. Yeah. They have this big like snake thing. Look at this. I don't know, it's filled with mulch or something. But I'll let you know if we see anything interesting. I have pictures of the Jenny Wade house. They didn't allow any videos in there, so but on the bus tour you can do video. We were allowed still photography in the Jenny Wade, so I have still photography. And thank you, snow remover, and thank you, little lady. I appreciate that very much. And I'll be back later, okay? Well, stay safe, video real. Bye, Count. Be careful. I'm gonna watch my stump. I'm good. All right. And Janae, I'm gonna check out the Vera Bradley outlet. I love you guys. God bless. Prayers for all.